call. We are here addressing the storm here in Texas in more ways than one. The way that the Texas grid failed the people. Many of you are joining us under dire circumstances. We appreciate you organizing in your communities as well as caring for those in your family and in your communities. So much mutual aid work going on. We want to recognize that, but we also want to address the systematic failure of Greg Abbott, Ted Cruz, John Cornyn, and all of the Republicans here in Texas who think or live by the motto that deregulation and privatization is the answer to our economic concerns. We're going to respond to that as the bold progressive voice here in Texas. We want them to know that we believe in public utilities for all, not just the wealthy, not just the well-connected. And we'll be discussing that throughout the call tonight. So thank you again for those who are joining us, those that are able to join us. Many of us were without internet for days. If you have a friend or family member who would like to listen to this broadcast, let them know they can join us by phone. They can find that phone number and share that with them, and we will share that with you guys in the chat. If you know someone who would like to listen through their cell phone by phone, as we know, many Texans are not just without power, but without internet and without access to mass communication. So thank you to those who are able to join tonight. We're broadcasting live on Facebook as well as Twitter and YouTube. So thank you to everyone who's allowed that and helped that to happen. Not just the Texas team, y'all, but the Our Revolution national team all pitched in to make sure that this call happens. We will be hearing stories from Texans across the state. So we thank those who have joined, those that have submitted their stories, their storm stories across the state, as well as the way Abbott has failed our state in providing power to the people. So we want to make sure that we address those concerns. We also want to let everyone know that our regularly scheduled program that was to happen tonight, Sheila Jackson-Lee was going to talk about her bill in Congress regarding reparations. We were going to talk about Dallas Police organizing review board, as well as several other guests. Domingo Garcia was going to join us to speak about the Vanessa Guillen Act. I am Vanessa Guillen. We will have that show next week, so please RSVP for that on Mobilize. You can find us at ourrev.us/mobilize to find the future show that we will post next week. We are going to deep dive tonight in what went wrong in Texas. Again, we want to thank all of our national crew who's joining us to help live stream this. We were without internet and power for days, and so we would not be able to do this without everyone coming together. Clayton, do you want to go over the agenda, or would you like me to?
Sure, I can go over the agenda. So as Christy was saying, we're doing an investigative deep dive into ERCOT, Abbott, and all their failures. We'll be talking about what happened, why it happened, talking about the blame game going on right now and who's actually at fault. And of course, how do we fix this mess? That is what we need to do. So right before we... Oh, go ahead, Christy.
I was just going to say we absolutely need to fix this mess, Clayton. And to fix this mess, it's going to take every single progressive, as Nina Turner says, with these hands. And we know many of your hands are in supporting the work that Our Revolution Texas is doing. We could not do this without you, without your support. We want to thank every single person who is a member of Our Revolution Texas. We don't receive grants or foundation money from, other groups. We are member supported. So every dollar that you give to Our Revolution comes right down to the support and work we do here in Texas. As Mike alluded to in the beginning, this is a different show for us. We will be asking people to call in to give us their storm stories and the way that the state of Texas and conservatives, what we like to say, corporatists who put profit before people, how they failed the people here in Texas, millions of Texans without heat, without electricity, without water. We want to bring those stories to light. If you have a story you would like to share during this broadcast, you can call us at 512-866-2396. Lauren Kenny will be taking those calls so that we can queue you up and discuss what happened to you, your family, and your friends. You can also submit that story online by visiting ortx.us/storm. That's ortx.us/storm to tell us your story online. Submit it there, and we'll try to queue you up into the broadcast. If you're watching this on social media and you would like to watch it on Zoom, you can head over to ortx.us/live. You can also, again, if your internet is spotty or you're having trouble hearing us, you can join us by phone at 346-248-779. The meeting number for that is 951-476-542. I'm going to give you guys that number one more time. So many of us without reliable internet tonight. 346-248-779. The meeting number 951-476-542. We are waiting just a few minutes now. Joining us in the show tonight will be Sheila Jackson Lee. Clayton or Mike, do we know if Sheila Jackson Lee has been able to join us on the call at this time?
It does not look like she is yet in, but we'll just go ahead and get going with the show. And then when Representative Jackson Lee jumps in, we'll just take a quick pause to hear from her. So we could go to the next slide. And next. There we go. So let's first start off by just laying what's really going on in Texas. Over 7 million Texans have lost power in this cold weather. And as you can see, for everyone who's joined, everyone's able to see the screen, we have a giant map of the United States, and you'll notice the whole map is blue except for Texas. There's a big red blob right there. Well, that's because Texas is the only state that lost power. And this storm didn't just hit Texas. It hit a lot of other states, but it's only hurt us. And the reason it's hurt us is because of huge systematic failures, which we will get more into later. Texas has its own grid. We'll talk about the history of that. And we saw this tweet from Representative James Talarico, which we thought was really great, that Texas is in a full humanitarian crisis. If this was going anywhere on in any other country, we would be calling that country a failed state. But of course, it isn't just about electricity. Over 7 million Texans are also without clean drinking water. They're without safe water, and roughly 250,000 don't have any water at all, including some of our own members. We talked to folks from all over. Some folks out in East Texas have been without water for 3 days. Some folks around Houston had to get water from a pond just to flush their toilet. And then if we continue on, we'll see that through all of this, even folks are dying because of all of this. At least 20 people that we know of at this point have died because of this. And this doesn't even include the massive Fort Worth pileup that happened right as this was going on, because again, that's a part of the winter storm where 6 folks died and 133 cars were crashed because they didn't salt or sand the roads. And we saw this from one of our members, and it's, prayers for my friend's family, please. She found her parents deceased holding one another in bed. The house had no power. They likely froze to death. Just imagine your parents surviving a global pandemic just to be killed by negligence. So let's continue on.
Yeah, Clayton, people are dying in Texas, and many people have compared us to what some would experience in a third world nation. Certainly, in some parts of Texas, in some families, in some households, it does not feel like we are living in a first world nation. And there are several reasons for that. We intend to go deep dive into that into the call, but also go over the consequences of what these failed attempts at deregulation, these failed attempts at privatization, and what the true costs are concerning those deregulatory practices. You can see here in this slide, if you're joining us by Zoom or on Facebook, this slide particularly emphasizes energy prices should reflect scarcity of supply. If a customer load is being shed, scarcity is at its maximum, and the market price for energy needed to serve that load should also be at its highest. I read that quote and quite frankly became a little angry, because many of you will remember at the beginning of the COVID crisis, at the beginning of the pandemic, there were people trying to price gouge on Amazon, and Amazon shut them down. There was an attempt, not just at Amazon, but even my local grocery stores. Many of us will remember that when COVID first began, price gouging was shut down. Yet in this instance, literally a life or death situation, price gouging was not just allowed, but encouraged by these so-called, air quotes, free market believers. And it's frustrating that so many people have suffered. Many Texans have an astronomical energy bill coming their way soon. As you can see in the slide, prices went from $25 per megawatt hour to $9,000 per megawatt hour. And what that means is, for those Texans that kept electricity on, they will be price gouged, and quite frankly, many families, working families in the state, cannot afford that. We need to remember, even Amazon, that's how low the bar is. Even Amazon stopped market gouging, and you will hear more of those stories in the show as we begin to talk about what people experienced directly from this storm.
Hey, Christy, this is Lauren, and I'm looking at some messages from some of our watchers, and we are gaining a lot of viewers, which is perfect, right? We need to all come together, and a lot of people are just upset, like you just said, right? This is hard, and it's been stressful, and already a pandemic, and, then Clayton's telling the story, and, what's it like after a year of saving your life daily with masks and sanitizer and stress and staying home and not going to holidays, and then come in to find your parents like that. And that's not, I'm often reminded, those aren't unique stories, right? Like she's not the only one. I hate to say it, but Texas is too big. That's not the only one. And, but anyways, I did want to tell you, I have a couple people. So when you're ready to hear some stories, give me like a 2-minute heads up.
Absolutely. We can see some of those stories here in the chat, Lauren, and we will definitely inject those throughout the show. We know that people are suffering right now, and we want to make sure that this is your opportunity to raise your voice. You can see there that we're posting the numbers that people can call into, as well as where you can submit that form online. Here's a quote from the Dallas Morning News, and I don't often quote the Dallas Morning News. Those of you that know me personally, Texans pay more for electricity now than other major markets. And we need to ask the question, why? Is that justice? Is that true, public utility service to the people? Is that truly a non-profit model? And I can see, David Michela put in the chat, he says, I was without power and water for 3 days. We weren't really in any rotation. 7 hours of power from Monday through Wednesday. I got to fix a frozen, busted water pipe now. He says he's doing much better than most. Thank you, David, for that testimony. I am right there with you, dealing with a busted pipe and some frozen pipes. And many of us lost, use of our sewage systems. It's been tough out there, and many of us have so many, quite frankly, failed right here in Texas. let's see, Lauren, do you have a story in particular you want to share?
Yeah, I I don't have anyone live on the phone yet, but I do have a story. So it's been just really rough for workers, right? And so a lot of us have known each other for 4 to 5 years, organizing around Bernie and the progressive movement. And my friend Rosie has been a constant story. She's been hit by every single issue that Texas has been hit by. First, the pandemic, then getting evicted because of the pandemic and they weren't working, and then trying to move, and then getting like totally taken by a real estate rent to own kind of problem. Like, I just can't even tell you. And I won't say her last name. I don't want to call her out. It was no fault of their own. But my good friend had to get up these last few days and risk their lives for her to go to Walmart, right, and work. But at the same time, on another feed at her Walmart, her exact Walmart. So I have a friend inside whose husband had to get up at 6 a.m, scrape the car, drive the route, because he didn't want to take his wife on a bad, icy roads. They only live less than a mile from the Walmart, but it's too cold to walk. And that's why they moved there when she got that job. And, it just goes on, Christy. And that's kind of where I'm at and the stories I'm hearing. And I know you guys want me to keep the stories kind of condensed and good, but I'm telling you, the stories are long and real. And every single story we hear tonight, I want to remind everyone listening, these aren't happening to just one-off people. This isn't like, oh my gosh, that happened to this one Mike, oh, hey, Mikey, he likes it. No, it's not one kid eating Life cereal. It's out of every 1,000 people in Texas, there's 100 horrible stories. So, but there's also so many silver linings and blessings. And that's what I wanted to tell you about my friend Rosie, because she actually reached out and told everyone she could that they didn't have this, but they had that, where to get this, water, food, milk, all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of blessings in it, but we shouldn't have to have these silver linings, blessings, calls to action over deaths.
Thank you, Lauren, for that. Clayton, do you want to talk more about who is to blame?
Yes. So let's start the blame game. So let's go to the next slide. There's a lot of blame going on, and there's 3 big actors who like to try to pass the blame around. We have ERCOT, which is a name that probably very few knew, including myself. I didn't really know ERCOT until a couple of days ago. We have state leaders and we have power companies. So let's go down these, for lack of a better term, these band of fools one by one and really get down who's to blame. So next slide. But before we begin, let's quickly talk about why Texas has its own grid. Texas has its own grid to basically avoid federal protective measures, such as being required to, winterize your equipment. FDR in the 1930s passed the Federal Powers Act that protected electricity distribution that crossed state lines, meaning that federal folks could make sure that power companies are reasonable and sensible, but if they don't pass state lines, they don't have the jurisdiction. So Texas decided not to move the energy across state lines. So that's why we have 3 big grids. So next slide. ERCOT, which is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, was formed in the 1970s, and it was tasked by the Texas Public Utilities Commission to basically manage electric reliability. And ERCOT is a private nonprofit corporation. In the 1990s, the Texas energy market, quote unquote, deregulated, which, let's be real, is far right talk to anarchy in the market. And ERCOT, has the authority to tell local providers, local power plants, like the LCRA and others, to shut down power. But they claim that they lack the authority to tell power plants to winterize their equipment. Next slide. And we very strongly believe that power needs to go to the people and not to corporations. ERCOT, again, which is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, in our opinion, it should really be called the Electric No Reliability Council of Non-Texans, because a lot of their board that's tasked to manage our electric grid doesn't even live in Texas. A third of the ERCOT does not live in Texas. The third of their board of directors doesn't even live here. There's no home rule here, and this is not local control. This is outside of his point. And let's take 2 examples. We have the chair, Miss Sally Halberg, lives in Michigan, and the vice chair teaches in Europe. So the vice chair isn't even in the United States. So this is not very locally controlled, which I don't think is exactly right. So let's go on to the next slide. And really, it's our point of view that ERCOT is like the town's fire department, except they don't live in town. They're not a public entity, and they claim that they're not allowed to fill their trucks with water. So they definitely have some fault, but they're not the only ones to blame. So let's go to next slide. But actually, before we do that, let's take a quick break to make sure that there's no one who's called in. So as Lauren is checking to see if anyone's called in, I do want to share a couple stories we've collected. This through our social media, through us checking people out. There's a lot of folks just have no power. One of our supporters who lives on the coast was saying they had to sleep with their dogs inside their truck because that's the only place they could get warm. A lot of our members have broken pipes. I had to help someone today get water. So you can see that truck with barrels. Those barrels were filled with water, so then they can get water. If you want to share your story, you can go to ortx.us/storm to tell us your story. So Lauren, before we continue down with the other band of fools to blame for all of this, do we have anyone calling in?
I don't have a call yet. I just put someone on hold, but they got disconnected, I guess. So I do have 2 people that have said they want to come on and tell their story. Both unique and interesting. I think we'll really learn a lot. I'll get back, check in with me on the very next time.
Okay. So let's move on to our next band of fools, which is the power company. So I pass the hat to Christy.
Yeah, Clayton, there's so much that could be said about what people are experiencing tonight, and really getting down to the why, as well as, what we hope to aim for is how to resolve these for future generations. One of the major concerns that people are addressing is this slide. Some of you are joining us by phone. I'll quickly read through. 185 power plants in Texas had to shut down because of their greed and negligence. Because Texas skirts around federal energy sensibilities, power plant corporations are not legally required to winterize their equipment. Because they put profits before people, they didn't winterize their power plants in Texas. I've been a resident in Texas continually for a very long time now, over 15 years, and I spent some of my childhood here. So I've experienced some harsh winters. Of course, nothing like this current time, but, it's frustrating. We know these freezes happen. We've all experienced different types of freezes, maybe not to this severity. And so it's frustrating. They have all this time, to prepare for a freeze. They know that people rely on electricity, not just to keep their homes warm in sub-zero temperatures, but, a lot of people in hospitals, on medical equipment, a lot of people who need, newborns, a lot of babies out there, children, are suffering the consequences of this loss of energy and, quite frankly, this inadequate grid system that's been completely deregulated and structured for the profits of the few at the expense of the many. So we want to make sure that people are aware as to the why this is happening and the failure of not just Greg Abbott, but the state of Texas to protect its residents and the people who call this great state home. If we could go to the next slide, here is a quote from Greg Abbott himself. This is, talk about a liar and a failure. Quite honestly, someone who's absolutely changing the facts. Greg Abbott says this shows how the Green New Deal would be a deadly deal for the United States of America. Our wind and our solar got shut down, and there were collectively more than 10% of our power grid, and that thrust Texas into a situation where it was lacking power on a statewide basis. It just shows that fossil fuel is necessary. For those that are joining us by phone, we have a giant fail across Greg Abbott's forehead. But more so than that, we should have put liar, because that is an absolute lie. There are countries where sub-zero temperatures are experienced, and their grid systems do not fail, and they rely heavily on green energy. So on this slide, you can see wind power in Antarctica, and it's a picture of working wind turbines in Antarctica. The average Antarctic temperature, 14 degrees to negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The problem is not technology. The problem is not green energy. The problem is you, Greg Abbott. You're the problem. And quite frankly, your philosophy, as well as the philosophy of conservatives, people who put greed and money over the well-being of people, you are the problem and the failure of what has happened in this state and across the United States. This for-profit driven motive is frustrating. Quite frankly, it makes me angry that so many people are suffering over something that could absolutely be prevented in the 21st century.
See, Christy, we have a very special guest who is just now joining us, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. Representative, are you there? The representative, it looks like you might be muted.
She's here. She's here.
Okay.
One moment.
We'll give Representative Sheila Jackson Lee just a few minutes as she gets her audio together. We do want to emphasize the number of Texans who are suffering tonight. Lauren, how are you? I can see you there on the phone taking calls. Is there anything you want to add before Representative Lee joins us?
Actually, I have Tim Weaver, who was with us. Look at your little grin, because, of course, we know him well. 2016, we were all national delegates fighting for Bernie and looking for these wins then. And that was before any of this stuff that we fight for today was common verbiage, right? We were all just learning our way. And here he is. Lauren, is she ready?
Lauren, if we could go to Representative Lee first. Is she ready in the queue there, Clayton?
She could be. Representative Jackson Lee, are y'all ready?
Hold on.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me just kind of, can you see me?
Looks like your camera's currently
Can you see
turned
me?
off. No, ma'am. Are you able to turn on your camera?
It died.
We can hear you, Representative Lee. Your audio is clear, and we do have your image file up on the slide deck, so you're welcome to begin speaking whenever you're ready. And we'll give them just a few minutes, Clayton, while they, get the audio transmission clear. Representative Lee, are you there? Okay, we're going to give you guys a few minutes. Lauren, is Tim ready to join us?
He's calling right back now, Christy. Listen,
Okay.
let me tell you real quick though. So Tim Weaver's in Tarrant County. He's got a great story. He's a union member. And let's hear what he has to say. Go ahead, Tim. Tell us what's been going on for you these last few days.
Hello, everybody. Appreciate y'all. Thank you. Good to see you, Christy and Lauren. Take care of yourself. Appreciate it. But I'm a butcher. Do have a political science degree from UT Austin, but lately it's been pretty dicey, guys. As a butcher for a major food distribution company here in North Texas, I've been on the front lines this whole time. I still haven't got a vaccine, even though I think I've got the antibodies. But lately, no heat, no water, kind of stays when you have a rear-wheel drive.
Hey, Tim, mute your computer, please. I think you're dual. That's all right. You're just, yeah, I think so. Go ahead.
I just got home. I apologize. Yeah, I'm a butcher in Tarrant County, and this really shouldn't be happening. And right before I got off work about an hour ago, North Richland Hills told us that we were not allowed to produce anymore, so I won't be doing any butchering. Who knows how long until they get the water fixed. Texas should have seen this coming, and we did, but I mean, politicians did too. They just didn't do anything about it.
So, Tim, let me ask you. So, you're a butcher. You're going back and forth to work. You've been dealing with this pandemic and masks and sanitizer. But these last few days, what's been the biggest challenge? Like, didn't you tell me about? Yeah, tell me about those struggles.
Oh, I mean, it's just they're not icing the roads. They're not doing anything about it to make sure people can get to and fro. And now they're throwing the water thing out there. Not to mention the loss of power. The big. Could have done this a lot smarter, in my opinion.
And just
a lot of wasted product, a lot of starving people that didn't have to happen.
Listen, let me ask you real quick. Is your store out of milk? Because that's a big concern here in Texas.
Shortly.
Yeah. And the recommendation, right, Tim? Are you hearing this too?
It is a marketplace. I mean, it's large.
Right. And you're hearing the suggestion is to drink other milk if you're not dependent on regular milk, so that children and babies that need that milk and can't adjust. No. Well, like that everyone else.
All right, I believe Sheila Jackson Lee. Looks like we got your video. Just about worked out.
Yeah. Here I am. Can you see me?
We can see you.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Lee.
Okay, let me take my furry hat off. Sorry. Can you see me now?
We can see you. Yes.
Great. Thank you so very much. It is good to talk to my friends, and that's what I call all of you. I've got a mask on because we're out here giving out water to people who have been violated by the ineptness of the state of Texas and a system that no one even understood. But you should see the lines of cars of people trying to get water. We're in the Houston-Harris County area where our local officials have worked very hard, but we're under a boil water order, and people have just been able to get out, though the temperatures now are dropping, and everyone still does not have power. So that just yesterday, we had the hearing on HR 40, which I hope to come back and extensively talk about it. But it was a powerful hearing with representatives from human rights organizations and Japanese Americans and the United Nations and civil rights groups, all talking about the question of equity and repairing, and the fact that if you help and end the horrible disparities created by holding people in bondage for 200 years as Black Americans, that you would lift all economic boats in the United States. Here in Texas, Texas designed their grid as an insulated, isolationist grid. They did that so they could avoid federal oversight and the regulatory structure of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. How about that? Trying to get away with not doing what was right, trying to get away with not having an intense review of the generators that they utilized. No one oversaw ERCOT. It was independent. The board members, many of them are not even from Texas. Most people don't know the physical or the institutional structure of ERCOT and what they do. They're like air traffic controls. They're conductors. They just move things around. And at the same time, they fail to check the infrastructure. So when we got 13 degrees, the nuclear plant froze, the windmills froze, the gas couldn't come out of the ground. Who would have known? But they were able to skate by because this is a 100-year episode. It may even be a 200-year or more episode. No one can remember when they last had this kind of frigid weather for this long a period of time. It pains my heart when I see these people in line, but it even pains my heart even more when we recount the people who have died in tragic deaths, grandmothers with 3 children, people with carbon monoxide poisoning, and we still don't know the extent of the people we might have lost because we're still engaging in what we call well checks. And this is urban and rural Texas. So we've got something to fight for sure. We've got to fight that the people are in charge and that transparency becomes the ultimate definition of what government is about, and particularly the Texas state government. And reparations is about corrective action and helping people who have been harmed. And as we help them, they then become the light, the bright and shining city on the hill that then helps all entities. So I'm delighted that you allowed me to come. We are probably going to be doing investigations in Washington. I'm encouraging the state legislators to do a major investigation. We're looking at how we can reform it from a federal level so that we have the kind of oversight that this particular agency needs, look to change laws. But in the meantime, we're going to look to get FEMA to help some of these people across the state of Texas. That's what we've been saying to people. Help is on the way, and you're not alone.
You know, Representative Sheila Jackson-Lee, thank you for joining us tonight. You've talked a lot about, the for-profit industry and how they've kind of deregulated Texas with purpose. How do you feel about these price gouging practices and what Texas families will experience, on their next electric bill?
Well, first of all, the question needs to be as to whether or not these energy companies owe the consumers a reimbursement and or to not require them to pay for power that they did not get. I think there are going to be major lawsuits. I wish it didn't have to be that way. But I think in the court of equity, where you've done harm and a person didn't deserve the harm, had nothing to do with it, you need to make them whole. These energy companies need to make these hardworking Texans whole. What about the people who've lost lives? One woman left her house. It was dark. She left her house. The power came on and a major fire took place in her house. She lost the precious memories of her husband, who was her beloved husband, who passed away and lost many of his very special mementos when he was in the United States military. How do you think someone like that feels? How can they ever get any of that back? So I think there should be maybe even criminal penalties for gouging, and there should be some way of addressing what has happened to people who've had to pay and have not been able to get power. Now, they're going to use things like this was weather related. It was not weather related. Yes, we have never had this kind of weather, but it was really related to the ineptness and the inadequacy of the grid. And that's not the consumer's fault. That's the business person's fault. Now, I believe in working with people and collaborating, but I also believe in people coming halfway and saying, we made a mistake and we're going to completely work with the oversight and the federal government to get this right.
Representative Lee, we want to thank you for not just representing the great state of Texas, but someone noted in the chat, you're out here serving the community during this crisis, while other representatives, quite frankly, were caught on luxury vacations in neighboring nations. So we want to thank you for being out there for the people and speaking the people's voice. If there's anything, our revolution, we really try to organize activism and organize activists across our state. If there's something that you could leave tonight with, inspiring other organizers and activists in Texas, what would you say to them about how we can resolve this issue now and into the future?
Well, I need a new lingo, which is we want a new grid. We want an interrelated grid. I didn't add to my presentation that when I began to ask the Department of Energy, can we not borrow from other states? Can we not call? They were willing to call for us. I said, can you call New York? Can you call California particularly? They said, Congresswoman, you have no transmission system, period, on your western border of Texas to be able to get any kind of help from California if they wanted to. How shameful. We want a new grid. We want a grid that is subject to federal oversight. We want a grid that is for the people. We want an updated grid. So we can use the language new grid, new day, new grid, new day. And then I'm going to sneak in HR 40. I need you to be able to encourage Congress people from around the nation to support HR 40, the commission to study and develop reparation proposals, because that goes to the issue of climate change. It goes to the issue of inadequate, how should I say it, the wealth gap. It goes to the issue of poor people versus people that have the means and are not using them for the greater good.
Representative Lee, thank you again for joining us. We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Time for a new grid.
Time for a new grid, new day. Representative Lee was joining us to speak on her bill about reparations. And we will continue that topic next week and have a full guest lineup for that. So thank you for joining us tonight, Representative Lee. We know you are busy. Most thank you for serving the community and being out there.
My pleasure to be with our revolution. Let's go get a new grid, a new time, and a new moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We want to thank Representative Lee for joining us. She was scheduled to speak on reparations tonight. With the storm and the crisis, of course, we invited her to come speak on, what's affecting the Houston community. There's lots of discussion about what's happening in Houston. Clayton, what do we have next in the deck? Are we sharing the screen now?
Next, we need to go to slide 24 so we can resume is talking about the blame game, and then we'll be telling some more stories once we finish talking about the blame game, and after that, blame game stories, and then we'll be doing our calls to action. So, Christy, you were going on about wind turbines in Antarctica. I mean, who would have thought? So do you want to talk about how fossil fuels are yet again failing us?
Yeah, we were talking about Antarctica, and I did read and heard that Texas was colder than Moscow. We really did experience, a freeze here. It's frustrating because, here in Texas, we aren't used to that kind of weather, but quite frankly, we live in the 21st century. We knew this was coming. We knew it was preventable, and we have the technology to protect people. 90% of the plants that failed in Texas have been oil, gas, and coal plants. 185 power plants closed down. All that kept us going was wind, solar, and nuclear energy. So, a lot of these profiteers like to talk about diversifying their portfolios. Well, how about you diversify your energy grid systems? Not only are fossil fuels causing climate chaos, Their power plants are the first to shut down when the going gets tough. And we want to emphasize that what Texas experienced, there was a map earlier that Clayton went over the western side of the grid in the nation, the eastern grid network, and then Texas being its own grid network. There was no reason that we had to go through this, that people had to suffer in this situation. If we could go to the next slide, we want to make sure that people are aware that, this didn't have to happen. And it's kind of like a religion to them, right, Clayton? This conservatism or this profit-making mantra.
I mean, I like to think of them as like, that TV show Hoarders? But instead of being obsessed with stuff, they're just obsessed with a failed ideology. So that's how I see them.
That's a simple way to put it, right?
Yeah. And even like Rick Perry, good old Governor Perry, he was saying that, Texans rather accept blackouts than power markets. Of course, we would like to call our former governor 3 words. Unfortunately, we just can't remember them.
Right. I think the first 2 words were peace of.
But it's that third one. What is that third word?
Fill in the blank. Peace of.
Guys, hold on. I'm going to get my friend's kid. He just said that word today, and he's like 1.5. Let me get you that video. It's coming in right now live.
Oh, boy.
So you can see, it's not just Abbott. It really is a conservative Republican. It's almost like a religion, right? They treat money as a religion. They treat profit as a religion. By any means, at any cost, no matter how many lives are destroyed, no matter how many deaths are caused, profit is their religion. What is it? And Jeremiah...
Actually...
Go ahead.
Actually, I think it's more of a cult at this point.
Sacrifices, literal human sacrifices are being made for profit.
Yeah.
So you guys can see that are joining us by Facebook or by Zoom. This is a direct quote from Jeremiah Espinosa. What is it with Republicans thinking we're willing to die for the free market? And there we have a picture of Rick Perry stating in the Houston Chronicle, Texans will accept blackouts to keep the feds out of the power market. That's insanity. That literally is human sacrifice.
And what's Senator Cruz up to? Let's check the next slide and see what our favorite. Yeah, I saw a really funny meme. I should have put it in the slide deck. That if Canada keeps sending all of us this cold weather, we'll send Ted Cruz right back to them. So during this whole time, as we saw, Representative Jackson Lee was there in her community helping folks. Our favorite senator, by which I mean our least favorite, decided to fly to Cancun and basically give us all the middle finger, because that's basically what he did. I mean, Chrissy, what do you think about old Teddy running away from the cold and from Texas?
In the pre-show, we talked about having the beach scenes as our backgrounds and the palm trees in the wind. But it just shows literally how out of touch these people are with everyday working class Texans, working families that are just trying to, live peacefully and have a safe place to go home to. And that just simply was not the case this week in Texas. There was, it was literally a dangerous place to live because we were so unprepared as a state. I did see that Liz emphasized your comment. Cult was the exact word I was thinking of. I guess I gave them too much credit by saying profit as a religion. maybe it is just a cult with human sacrifice as the necessary, take there.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look what's going on in the Texas capital of Austin. I think we have a picture of Austin because they were talking about rolling blackouts, but I don't think blackouts are exactly rolling, because from what we've been hearing is that while East Austin and South Austin, other parts of Austin were really suffering through these cold nights without electricity, the downtown was lit up like a Christmas tree. Did you hear that, Christy?
I did, Clayton, and some of the response to that was, well, these buildings were on private generators, and they were using generators to light up their buildings. But, it is a question of why don't we have green power energy in the state of Texas, one of the warmest, sunniest states in the nation, where that energy could be fed back into the grid. But instead, those motives for profit were more than preparing our state for the very, very cold and even the very, very hot. I do see a funny comment from Chris Vasquez, one of our Revolution team members here in the state. He says, it's like that scene in Shrek when Lord Farquaad said, some of you may die, but it's the sacrifice I'm willing to make. I mean, that's what we hear from Perry. That's what we hear from Abbott. That's what we hear from Cruz. And we want Texans to know, is that what you find acceptable, those human sacrifices, so that the market can profit off of the bodies and the lives lost?
Christy, you were mentioning that, those towers had their own private generators, which they claim. But, I think if we go to the next slide, we'll see, a tweet about a hospital in Austin. And it says, my source tells me that they're trying to evacuate 300 patients from a hospital in Austin, and the pipes just burst and there's flooding. And this is also going on in the OR, not our Revolution, but the operating room of the Children's Hospital. And all because Texas wanted to skip a little and keep our energy private. So basically, these big towers where, let's be very frank, the rich people live, they get all lit up. But then we have literal children's hospitals being evacuated. Am I understanding this correctly, Christy?
I mean, I've been in a NICU before where the premature babies are held. In case people don't know what a NICU is, that is where premature babies are held when they're born early. Many of them on oxygen machines, many of them under UV lights, blue lights. And this is just a literal crying shame. There's so much that could be said here, but the fact that children, people in hospitals, the least among us, the youngest among us, the tiniest among us, are being sacrificed so that the wealthy few can profit off the suffering of the many. It's so upsetting, Clayton. It's sad, almost too sad to be angry about. It's frustrating, it's immoral and ethical, and I hope that this state changes the way it, quote unquote, runs business as usual.
So it looks like in the interest of time, because we do want to be very respectful of everyone's time, let's go ahead and jump to what we're going to do. What's our next steps? How do we fix this? And then we'll wrap it up with some good old storytelling. So there's 4 parts of what we need to do. First, we need to make sure that Abbott, Senator Cruz, and Senator Cornyn, who takes a whole lot of fossil fuel money, so we all know what side he's actually on, and it's not our side, that them and their band of fools need to resign. They need to resign or be fired at the ballot box. Greg Abbott, I know, is going to be on the ballot box in 2022, so either he resigns now or he is going to lose. And that's what we're going to be determined to make happen. So, I mean, we really just got to kick them all out. We want to actually go to part 2. Well, Christy, do you want to add anything? Abbott and all the cronies?
We definitely need a functioning government, as the slide emphasizes. There are a few quotes here. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "Let us not be afraid to help each other. Let us never forget that government is ourselves and not an alien power over us." Government is organized self-help. When we all chip in to fund our public roads and schools, we're both helping ourselves and helping each other. And that is the issue with these people that tout smaller government, some even insane government, that we together can be more powerful than if we individually chipped in. The public utility system needs to be reimagined, reinvigorated, and funded to do its job so that it powers all the people, not just the wealthy, not just the few. And there are a few things, thinking about tonight's show, there was a lot going on, right? We're reading all the news articles, watching the news. It was almost too much to digest. But there are a few things that I took away about politics in Texas, and specifically the grid failure system, the political failure of Texas. There are a lot of Lone Rangers in Texas, and you guys might have heard some of those quotes from mayors, general conservatives that believe people should, air quotes, pick themselves up by their own bootstraps, even if they don't have boots or straps. Philosophy of dog eat dog politics. Dog eat dog, if that's what they believe should be the slogan of Texas, we need to remove the slogan of the so-called French state and just change it to the dog eat dog state, because that's literally what they're encouraging, rather than us helping each other. This emphasis on privatization rather than public utility, the public good, very frustrating. And the first time I moved to Texas, I heard that saying, and you guys have heard it, and Clayton, I'm sure you grew up hearing it here in Texas. So many amazing, bold progressives here in Texas. I heard that saying the first time I moved here as an adult, bless their heart. And really, if I put that anger aside for a moment and you hear them speak about profit, deregulation, smaller government, all of the nonsense that they spew, I really do think of that saying, bless their heart. And today, this can get heavy because so many people are suffering, millions in Texas. I just kept thinking about those of you that grew up in the 90s and used to watch Saturday Night Live. There was one of my favorite characters. She used to say, well, ain't that special? And some of these Republicans and GOP, members touting this cult, this religion of profit, this religion of putting profit over people, it really is special, don't you think, Clayton?
Yeah, it's a special type of crazy. So let's keep on going. Let's look at what's the third part. So we talked about, kicking out Abbott and his band of fools and, making sure the government does something. So let's talk about ERCOT. So we need to Texasize it, not nationalize it, but Texasize it, because this is Texas. So we think that we should turn ERCOT into a giant publicly owned electric co-op, which that's about as Texan as you can get. And even here in Lampasas, we get a lot of our electricity from the Hamilton co-op. And the way that works is if you get electricity from them, then you are a member of that co-op and you get to vote, and who are the board of directors, and you get to vote and everything else. So let's just do that for ERCOT. Why not? We can certainly do it. This is Texas. We can do whatever we want if we set our minds to it. But you should also make sure all board members actually live in Texas. And because we believe in democracy, then we should also make sure all the board members are democratically chosen in some form or another. We also want Texas Ledge to fully audit ERCOT and to end just the anarchy in our energy system. Make sure there are protections, that there are prices, and let's actually work with the other grids. Let's actually make sure that we have connections, not just like one or two like we have now, but that we are fully connected with all the Eastern grid and the Western grid. And of course, the final bit, the thing that Governor Abbott likes throwing shade at every single chance he gets, the Green New Deal. So, Christy, do you want to? I mean, you were really on a roll with that wind power in Antarctica. Do you want to talk about the Green New Deal, Part 4?
Yeah, the Green New Deal, of course, is the 21st century solution to the problems that many of us are facing. And that's really, Clayton, what it boils down to: improving, renewing, creating a modern, diversified energy system with a heavy reliance on green energy. And so you can see here, we needed Texas with the Green New Deal. It was our wind and solar that kept at least some of our lights on. We need to build more wind turbines, more solar energy, modernize our grid system, create a smart grid system as opposed to a dumb for-profit grid system. We need green hydrogen production if we really are to look at the future of modernizing our system, and so many more options and opportunities that we've yet to even discuss, because we're stuck in this old-fashioned, horse and buggy, use the telegraph. I don't know what these people are thinking, but they're literally stuck in old technology. Oil and gas are so 17th century, so 18th century. Come on, y'all. We can do better.
But it's even, we were even going before, because before gas and oil, what was Texas known for? Those wind turbines, like what they used to pump water out. It's those old creaky windmills. Always saw them in old westerns. So Texas has already been known for its wind. We're just 21st century version of that, which is what the Green New Deal is. So we are going to be pushing real heavy for the Green New Deal. Preferably Congress would do it, but hey, I think we can get something passed on the state legislature. Once we kick out Abbott, Patrick, and switch over the ledge to being a nice, beautiful, progressive blue, and that is what we're going to be fighting for. Again, we really push in Congress. So, do we have any other stories? We always like ending these things on a story if we can.
I do have one quick story I can tell you. So it's a happy and sad story, okay? So before the news even let on, we those of us doing mutual aid in all the back channels, right, of all of us that are skirting around town trying to get people to warming stations, we knew grocery stores shelves were running out of stuff, and we got a call, or we got a post about a family that needed milk for 2 very young kids who already had shown nut allergies. So they are not willing to even try any kind of nut milk because it could be, or alternate milk because it can be made where nuts are also manufactured. So this morning, a really cool guy that I only met once that I messaged, who lives in Sherman, which is near the Woman, which is like an hour north of here. He got up at 8 this morning. He was the second one in into Walmart, and he didn't hoard. There were 22 gallons of milk left. He took 2 for 2 children and did his quick shopping of some very basics and got out of the store and got those kids their milk. That milk for that family actually sustains them with all what they had and all the formula that they can add. We'll get them through 4 days. But guess what, guys? That's probably not going to be enough. And that's the sad part of it. But what I'm telling you about the silver linings is those heroes. This guy Robley driving 20 miles to go to a Walmart that was going to open and had food and had electricity to open, and then brought it to where it could get brought to the family, and the family getting it. And that's what this is all about. And that's what we're trying to talk about. Democracy is looking around at your neighbors, the people closest to you, and making sure they have what they need. Guys, thank you so much for taking this opportunity tonight to not force us to talk about issues we know are so important, like reparations. And I forget what the other stuff you guys were going to cover tonight, but thank you. I just want to tell you thank you. I've been struggling here. I have kids below me that I can hear with their puppy and their kids just cramped into a little teeny house, like blowing up. Kids have a lot of energy, and being stuck in these cold houses, it's just not fun. And I appreciate that we took this opportunity to face head on a huge problem that we together can fix.
Yeah, and really quickly, before we lead off, I want to make sure that we highlight two stories. Someone in Govinda in East Texas says, a story shared in the chat. I'm sorry. I live in Tyler, Texas. I went to a family member's house who had water. It was a harrowing experience to go out there and drive. My neighborhood was completely snowed in. This young guy around our neighborhood was just going around pulling people out of the snow. We made it back home safe afterwards. This has been a lot, but this all has been a return to Southern values. Real Southern hospitality and charity. There is hope. I think that's, neighbors helping neighbors. Clayton, you've talked about that. And another person, Dee, who is permitted to talk, but I'm unsure if they're able to connect their audio. Dee says, regarding this week, I live in a nice neighborhood, and fortunately, we have been luckier than many others. There are people in our street that have been out of power for days. I think this entire neighborhood is all electric. There are so many odd irregularities regarding what service is available and at what level. For example, across the street, no electricity. Next door, no internet. Well, we have both. And so those are some of the experiences people are having in Texas. Many of us know so many suffering. We want you to know that our hearts are with you, and we intend to change a system that is not only unjust, but immoral, and quite frankly, outdated and irrelevant. Clayton, what do we want to end this call? I think those are the stories I could see in the chat that I grabbed. Again, you guys can submit your stories by going to ortx.us/storm. That's ortx.us/storm. Every story we receive will be sent to the governor, as well as Abbott. If you mark that in the form, we'll be sending it to Abbott, Cornyn, and Cruz to make sure that they know you're real people who are suffering with real stories, so they cannot ignore Texans or the voice of Texans in Texas. Clayton, do you want to close out for us?
Sure, but right before closing out, definitely want to give a huge thank you to everyone who joined us today, and a huge thank you to our members. We are completely sponsored by members. We don't have any corporate sponsors or any foundation sponsors or any billionaire sponsors because, let's be frank, they're not giving us anything. So to everyone who's becoming a member, thank you so much. I've seen we got a couple new members just during this show. If you want to become a member yourself, you can go to ortx.us/member. As you see, we are rolling out membership cards. We have a national membership card, which you can get if you become a member to national. Wherever you are in the nation, you'll get that if you are a recurring donor of $5 a month. Now, if you're in Texas, because this is Texas and we all know how we Texans are, we also have our own handy dandy membership card. So if you are a dues paying member in Texas, we'll be working to make sure you get both of these cards because, again, everything's bigger in Texas. So including the number of membership cards we get. So again, we want to thank everyone who has become a member. I know I'm a member, Christy's a member, Lauren and Mike, we're all members of this movement because that is how we are powering through this movement. And that's how we know the movement remains loyal to us, to the people, and not to any billionaires or foundations or corporations. And quick shout out to all of our future local meetings. All change starts local. So we have a bunch of local meetings, which you will see on the next slide. Central Texas is the fourth Mondays. That's going to be canceled for this month because that's when we are doing our talk about reparations in the Vanessa Guillen Act. But North Texas is first Tuesday. East Texas is the last Saturday. of the month, Harris County. That's a shout out to all our friends in Harris County. Y'all are the first Saturday. Fort Bend, Brazoria, y'all are the second Saturday. El Paso, y'all are the second Tuesday. In South Texas, that is both the RGV, Laredo, and we are adding Corpus Christi to that mix. Y'all are the first Thursday. You can go to our website, ortx.us/calendar, to find those events and to RSVP to make sure you get the Zoom link, because all of our meetings are still very virtual. And to finally wrap up the call, we have a way that we love ending all of our calls. It's with a chant. And this is what for everyone who's unfamiliar with the chant, it's when we organize, we win. So if you could, everyone who wants to join in the chat, we encourage you to unmute yourself, and we will be doing the chant in 3
times.
2, maybe. Well, if we're feeling extra enthusiastic, but it's when we organize,
we win.
When we organize,
we win.
All right. We hope you all stay warm, stay safe. Be safe out there. The roads are still slick, and y'all have a good night.